Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. The violet smog of Narxel 9 clung to Darren Vale's coat like wet ash, staining the seams of his old synth leather jacket as he shoved through the teeming bazaar. His collar was pulled high, not just against the toxic haze, but against the gazes of those who might recognize him, or worse, remember what he used to be. The air buzzed with the sounds of 100 alien dialects, punctuated by the hissing vent pipes of overworked merchant stands. Fuel exhaust, illegal spice vapors, grilled off-worlder meat, all melded into a stench so foul most visitors gagged on first breath. Darren found it nostalgic. "You're scowling again," came the silky vibration of a voice by his neck. Darren didn't glance down. "I'm not. You are. Makes you look constipated. Not great for business." "Stuff it, grin." The sentient cloak, currently wrapped loosely around his shoulders, sighed dramatically. Grin had a voice like a bored aristocrat and the patience of a caffeinated squirrel. Darren ignored him, adjusting the strap on his shoulder bag. Inside were scavenged tech parts smuggled from the Imperial crash fields last week. Most of it was junk, or at least it would be to someone without Darren's eye for value. A cracked neural interface, a broken regulator core, a few obsolete Imperial beacon chips. With the right hands, it could power a slum district for weeks or crack a secure door in half a second. He reached his stall, just a sheet of rusted Durasteel laid across two crates, and laid out the day's offerings. A zillion, all 6 arms and slime-slicked mandibles, approached with greedy interest. 40 credits, Darren said flatly before the creature could even grunt. The zillion chittered, offering 30. 40, Darren repeated. No movement, no emotion. Just the tone of someone who'd rather starve than barter. His hand drifted, not threatening, but visible, toward the plasma cutter on his belt. The zillion chittered again, softer this time, and slid the full amount across the table before scampering off with the parts. "You could have gotten 50, Grin whispered. "Not worth the conversation," Darren muttered. He pocketed the credits. 5 more sales like that, and maybe he'd treat himself to real food tonight. Something that didn't come out of a protein synth packet. Then the world cracked open. It started with a scream, not from a person, but from the sky. A high-pitched whine tore through the smog as a sleek, wedge-shaped skiff roared overhead. Imperial design, clean lines, advanced propulsion, and currently smoking like a dying star. It spun sideways, clipped a neon sign, and spiraled downward in a violent arc that sent the crowd scattering. Darren barely had time to duck behind his table as the vessel slammed into the ground with a thunderous impact 20 meters away. The shockwave knocked half his salvage into the dust. Sparks flew. Panic erupted. His first instinct was to curse loudly. His second was to reach for his weapon. Before he could even draw it, the hatch on the skiff exploded open with a hiss of pressure and a rush of heat. 2 figures leapt from the wreckage. They landed in perfect sync, absorbing the impact of a 12-foot drop with a grace that no normal being should have possessed. Darren froze. The crowd was already fleeing. He stayed half in curiosity, half in survival instinct, and stared. Women, but not like any women he'd ever seen. The first was shorter, but not by much. Her skin glowed a deep orchid, like she'd been dipped in starlight. Long silver hair flowed behind her like a comet trail, untouched by smoke or soot. Her eyes locked onto Darren, instantly wide, urgent, in a shade of amethyst so vivid it defied logic. The second was taller, darker, indigo skin that deepened in the shadows. Her black hair was cropped short, militaristic, exposing sharp cheekbones and colder, calculating eyes that scanned the bazaar like a tactical readout. She radiated danger, not just in the way she moved, but in the stillness between those movements, like she was always one breath from striking. Both were barefoot, both wore tattered silk garments that had once screamed royalty, and both were running. Oh, Grin purred against Darren's neck. This just got very interesting. The silver-haired woman reached him first. Her chest heaved with effort, but she didn't tremble. Up close, her beauty was overwhelming. Flawless symmetry, radiant skin, even beneath the soot, in a body that seemed engineered to disarm every instinct of caution. "You," she said. Not a request, not a plea, a command. You'll help us. Darren blinked. Like hell I will. Her companion stepped forward, eyes locked onto his. We are property of Emperor Zoraxis, she said coldly. We have escaped. They will find us in minutes. Still not my problem, Darren replied, already turning to gather his scattered tech. He wasn't stupid. Imperial skiff 2 fugitive women, beautiful or not, that kind of trouble came with a death sentence. But then she touched him, the silver-haired one. Her fingers locked around his wrist like steel, and he gasped. Not from pain, from shock. If you don't help us, she whispered, they'll burn this entire sector to ash looking for us. A beat passed. We'll do anything. Dibs on the tall one, Grin whispered in Darren's ear. Darren yanked his arm free and spat on the ground. Do I look like a damn charity? The taller one's gaze cut deeper than her words. No, she said. You look like a man who hates the Empire more than he values his own safety. And just like that, he hesitated. The whine of pursuit vessels echoed in the distance. Names, he barked. I am Valari, the silver-haired one said. Cyrene added the tall one. Darren cursed. Pack this up, he ordered. Fast. They obeyed without question. As they scrambled to gather his salvaged tech, Darren slung his bag over his shoulder and looked toward the sky. Move like you belong, he growled. Because if you don't, we all die. They moved faster than any noble should have known how. Valari's hands flew across the scattered tech, scooping up parts with surprising precision, placing regulators with stabilizers, sorting fragile components from junk like she'd done it all her life. Cyrene, at first hesitant, joined in just as effectively, her motion surgical and unhurried, like every second was a calculated variable in a risk equation. Darren didn't comment. He just watched his brain screaming at him for doing something stupid. His legs carried him down the alley regardless, pulse syncing with the distant thrum of Imperial engines in the upper atmosphere. This way, he barked. He ducked down a side path, weaving through junk heaps, old scaffolding, and cracked piping long since forgotten by city officials. The electromagnetic pollution from black market energy siphons kept drones blind here. Darren knew these back alleys like he knew the weight of a plasma cutter. The women followed without a word, silent barefoot shadows. His workshop sat where no sane being would look, the rusted belly of an old cargo freighter, half buried under wreckage and wrapped in camo netting. It looked like a corpse left to rot, which was the point. He punched in the code. The door hissed open. In. They didn't hesitate. Darren slammed the door behind them, sealing it with a hiss of hydraulic locks and activating the dampening field that masked life signs from long-range scans. For now, they were invisible. This is secure, Valari began, voice echoing in the confined space. I didn't ask for reviews, Darren snapped, crossing to the workbench and tossing his salvaged parts into a bin. The workshop was a haphazard mess. One cot, one wall lined with tools and cobbled together weaponry. A repurposed sanitation pod in one corner. Cooking unit with questionable fuel filters. It wasn't much, but it had kept him alive longer than most. Cyrene wandered her fingers, brushing a half-built fusion core. You're a scavenger, she said flatly. And you're a problem, Darren replied. Then you shouldn't have brought us here. Didn't say I was smart. Valari stepped forward, just close enough to invade his space. Her scent was subtle, like crushed quartz and static. Her violet skin caught the light from the crystalline lamp overhead, shimmering like her body had internal circuits. One night won't be enough, she said quietly. He met her gaze, still beautiful, still dangerous. They'll lock this district down for a week, she continued. Not my issue. It became your issue when you brought us here, Cyrene countered. Her voice held no heat, just fact. She was already scanning the layout of the room like a tactician analyzing a battlefield. Why did you, she asked sharp now. Darren didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Maybe it was her voice, Valari's voice. Something about the way she spoke, like music wrapped in steel. Or maybe it was the way her eyes caught the light, reminding him of Xena. Damn it. The name brought a knife to his chest. The Empire's taken enough, he muttered. That's all. Valari smiled, not seductive, not coy, genuine. And that made it worse. That made it real. A man of principle, she said softly. A man of survival, he corrected. And you're threatening that. Sirens howled in the distance, Imperial patrol ships buzzing over the district like angry hornets. Darren moved to his comrade. Cyrene was already there, hands dancing across his equipment like she'd been born to interface with tech. She accessed his systems in seconds, boosted their encryption, rerouted power, all without asking. "You've done this before," Darren said cautiously. "Intimately familiar with Imperial patterns," she replied, not elaborating. Within minutes, the workshop changed. Valerie unpacked a small device, barely larger than a coin, that unfolded into soft silk bedding. A crystalline node emerged from under her tattered sash, glowing faintly and filling the room with a low-frequency hum, calming but alien. "What the hell is that?" Darren asked. "Comfort," Valerie replied. "You should try it sometime. Comfort gets you killed." "So does tension," she said, stretching like a cat on the floor. The silk clung to every curve as she moved. Darren turned away. Cyrene was assembling some sort of tech at his bench. He didn't recognize it. Sleek, modular, whisper quiet. "You find this amusing?" he asked. "No," she said, not looking up. "I find it necessary. Designed for discomfort, are we?" Cyrene's eyes flicked to his face, a figure of speech. But there was weight behind it. Night fell. The streets outside grew quieter, but not safer. Patrols tightened. Drones scoured rooftops. Darren stayed up cleaning weapons. Valerie lay nearby, pretending to rest, eyes closed, but every breath alert. Cyrene didn't pretend. She sat against the far wall, unblinking, studying Darren like he was a puzzle she'd nearly solved. "She's cataloging your weaknesses," Grin whispered, "calculating how fast she could kill you if needed." "Good thing I don't have any weaknesses," Darren muttered. Grin hummed, "Lying to yourself is my job." A proximity alarm blinked soft, subtle. Darren leaned toward the monitor. Cyrene joined him instantly. "Bounty hunters," she identified, analyzing the thermal signatures. "Not Imperials. 3. Advancing on this sector." "You can tell. Imperials move in formation, hunters fan out." Darren grabbed his rifle. "Stay here. Don't touch anything." "You can't engage them," Cyrene warned. "It'll bring more heat." "I'm not engaging," Darren said, checking his charge. "I'm redirecting." Valerie stood beside him. "Let me come. I can help." "You'll get us both killed." "I'm not helpless." Something hardened in her expression beneath the silk and beauty. Something real. Something dangerous. "Prove it by staying put," Darren said, then opened a hidden panel. "Lock this behind me." Grin flowed around him like a second skin rippling into a stealth weave. As Darren slipped into the night, he felt the eyes of 2 fugitives burning into his back, one calculating, one desperate, both unknown. But that didn't matter. He had a message to send, and it started with a lie. Darren returned just before dawn, the sky above Narxel 9 tinged with that sickly violet hue that passed for sunrise on this planet. The toxic clouds always glowed strangely at first light, like the world itself couldn't decide whether to breathe or choke. He entered through the hidden hatch, his boots coated in grime, the scent of plasma still clinging to his jacket. Valerie was waiting by the door. "You didn't kill them," she observed. "Not a question, a conclusion." "Dead hunters don't spread rumors," Darren replied, sealing the lock behind him. "Living ones say what you want them to say." Her amethyst eyes lingered on him differently now. Less desperation, more recognition. She was beginning to see him. Not just a scavenger, something more. Inside, Cyrene had reconfigured half of his communication array. Not rewired, refined. Power modulation had been tightened, energy signatures minimized. It was surgical work, beyond military. "You do that with standard tech?" he asked. Cyrene looked up from her adjustments, her tone cool as always. "I do that with purpose. Your systems were a liability." "You're welcome." "We didn't ask for welcome," she said. "We asked for time." "And what will you do with that time?" Darren crossed the room, tossed his rifle on the cot. "Start over. Get caught again." Cyrene didn't flinch. Escape is not a destination, it's a delay. Valerie moved closer, her steps soundless on the metal floor. She stopped just beside the cot, glancing down at the burn scars that lined Darren's exposed forearm. Old injuries healed poorly. "Imperial plasma rifle," she said, softly, fingers hovering over the mark. "Imperial." "Everything," Darren muttered, pulling his arm away. "You help us," she said quietly. "Why?" Darren kept his gaze on the tools beside him. His fingers twitched around a calibrator he wasn't really using. "I've lost enough to the Empire." Valerie leaned in. "That's not an answer." Darren looked at her, really looked. And in her eyes, he saw not just engineered beauty, but a question aching to be answered. Beneath the amethyst hue, there was fire, a rebellion she hadn't yet voiced, a hunger to be more. The Emperor doesn't want us back, she said. Her voice carried that strange weight again, light and heavy at once. He wants us erased. Darren frowned. You said you escaped from what? She didn't speak immediately. Instead, it was Cyrene who answered, her voice drifting across the room like a slow-moving blade. We were made. Darren's eyebrows lifted. Not born. Cyrene continued, folding her arms. Engineered. Created. I am a shadow clone of High Advisor Vexus, genetically enhanced to mimic, seduce, and replace political threats. Darren stared. An infiltrator. A copy with a kill protocol. But something went wrong, Val-Ari added. Something in the programming we learned to want. Cyrene's gaze shifted, her tone losing just a sliver of its coldness. And wanting is not permitted for property. There was silence. And then it hit Darren like a hammer to the gut. He hadn't taken in fugitives, he'd taken in victims of something far worse than capture. He stood slowly, walked to the far wall. Grin was draped on the chair like a cloak hung out to dry, but he shifted now, almost gently. You like them, Grin said, voice low. More than you should. They're dangerous. Not exclusive concepts, boss. Darren sat rubbing a hand over his face. He remembered the sterile halls of Mira Prime, the polished marble, the screams they tried to muffle behind soundproof glass. He remembered Xena. Cyrene moved beside him, silent as a phantom. You've seen it, she said. The Empire's labs, what they do. Darren didn't answer. Val-Ari stepped forward. Her hand touched his barely, a graze, a test. We are not designed to survive alone, she said. That's why we found you. You make it sound like a plan. Maybe it was. Grin chuckled softly. You're in deep now, Dar. Cyrene tilted her head slightly. Your cloak speaks often. Unfortunately. What's its name? Grin. Val-Ari reached out to touch it. Grin rippled under her fingers like a cat stretching into affection. Hello, gorgeous, it purred. She yanked her hand back. It talked. Doesn't shut up, Darren muttered. Cyrene's eyes narrowed with intrigue. Sentient fabric was banned centuries ago. Not banned, Darren corrected. Confiscated. The Empire never destroys tech it can weaponize. Cyrene stepped closer. How did you acquire it? I liberated it. From where? Darren downed a sip of contraband liquor. From the Empire, along with a few other things they didn't deserve. Grin perked up. Including me, best theft of his life. Before me, he had no fashion sense and even fewer friends. You're not my friend. I'm wounded. Val-Ari smiled again, this time wistful. You steal living things, Darren Vale. I save them. Her gaze softened. Is that what you're doing with us? Darren didn't answer. He didn't have to. Later that night, when Cyrene retreated to her corner to monitor patrol patterns, and Val-Ari settled beside Darren on the cot, the silence between them thickened, not uncomfortable but full. You have the eyes of someone who's seen too much, she said, her head resting near his shoulder. I have the nightmares to match. Then maybe we can share one. Her lips brushed his cheek, not needy, not lustful, just real. Darren closed his eyes. And for a moment in the toxic quiet of Narxel 9, there was something like peace. The peace didn't last. 4 days passed under smog and strain. Darren kept watch during the day, scouted during the night, and tried foolishly to pretend this wasn't spiraling out of control. The women had slipped into his routine with alarming ease. Val-Ari had claimed his floor with silk and crystal, adding beauty where there should have been none. Cyrene had updated his systems, shielding them with security layers Darren didn't even know were possible. But even Darren knew Narxel 9 wouldn't stay quiet forever. He was returning from a supply run, hands full of protein packs in thermal cells, when the perimeter alarm flared red. Doors open, Grin whispered, voice lower than usual. Something's wrong. Darren's boots hit the deck fast. He dropped the bag's rifle, already in hand. The outer hatch had been forced, no alarms triggered. That wasn't brute force. That was precision. That was Imperial. Inside the workshop was a mess, tools scattered. Val-Ari's crystalline lamp shattered on the floor, his custom array blown out. No bodies, but signs of struggle. They took them, Grin hissed. Professional team, clean extraction, no blood, which means they want them alive. Darren's throat tightened. He moved like a machine, checked for surveillance breaches, disabled the fail-safe self-destruct protocol he might need to return, gathered every weapon, every hacked module, every ounce of willpower he had left. "This is suicide," Grin whispered as he slithered back over Darren's shoulders. "Good," Darren growled, "just checking that we're on the same page." The trail wasn't hard to follow. Whoever took the women hadn't masked their energy signature well enough. Darren followed it through Narxel's eastern ruins, past the slums, into the abandoned industrial sector. And there it was, a forgotten imperial manufacturing complex, long dead now crawling with silent death. "The Empire doesn't waste resources like this," Darren muttered, watching movement from a rooftop. "They're doing it here to stay off the grid. No oversight. Field interrogation. Or worse." Grin shivered. "We've been here before." "Yeah," Darren said, voice hollow. "Mira." He infiltrated through the old vent shaft, small, narrow, rusted tight in places. But he knew these designs. He had drawn them. Inside, shadows moved. He reached a grated overlook. Below, in the wide concrete center of what used to be an assembly floor, two figures knelt under floodlights. Valari, arms restrained behind her back, silver hair matted with blood. Cyrene, standing but unmoved, spine rigid as a blade. Her indigo skin bruised her expression, a mask of defiance. Before them stood something monstrous. A towering armored figure, 8 feet of obsidian metal lined with crimson circuitry, a helmet shaped like a scowling god. A voice modulator crackled as it spoke. "The Emperor is disappointed." Grin recoiled. "Onyx Paladin." Darren's blood turned to ice. Only a few were ever created. They weren't soldiers. They were messages in armor. Final answers, tools of fear. The Paladin paced. His prized possessions reduced to fugitives. Valari spat. "We're not property." The Paladin's arm lashed out. A backhand. Valari hit the floor. "Everything is property," it said. "Some just require more maintenance." Darren didn't breathe. 6 soldiers guarded the perimeter. The Paladin's armor shimmered with adaptive shielding. Direct attack meant death. Grin whispered distraction. Darren nodded. Grin slithered silently from his shoulders and disappeared into the dark. Below, the Paladin spoke again. "Your codes will be extracted. It will not be pleasant. But the Empire wastes nothing." Cyrene's voice cut through. "You'll never access them." "We shall see." Then crash. Far side of the facility, metal against concrete. 4 guards peeled away toward the sound. Darren moved. He dropped from the vent, landed silently behind one soldier. A blade through the throat. A quick spin of thrown knife, second soldier collapsed. The Paladin turned crimson blade, igniting with a deep hum. "A protector emerges," it is said mockingly. How quaint. Darren placed himself between the Paladin and the women. "Let them go." The Paladin's laughter echoed from its modulator. "You're just a scavenger, a broken man playing hero for Imperial waste." "Run," Valari choked. "You can't fight it." Darren said nothing. He reached up and removed his glove. His hand was a scarred mess of flesh and glowing metal. Embedded in his palm, a pulsing, sinister node of alien tech. An Imperial kill switch module. The Paladin froze. Recognition. "Architect Vale." Darren's lip curled. "Guess I forgot to mention, I built the Emperor's palace." Even Cyrene flinched. The Paladin took a step back, recalculating. "You survived the Mira incident." "I do that." "You were declared dead." "Close enough." The Paladin's hand moved toward its communicator. "I wouldn't," Darren warned. "You transmit, I trigger a feedback loop in your armor. You remember Echelon lockdown protocol?" "Impossible. Those schematics were sealed. Not from the guy who designed them." The Paladin hesitated. "Then the Empire does not negotiate with traitors." His blade flared. Grin dropped from the ceiling like a shadow missile latching onto the Paladin's face. "Surprise, motherfucker!" Grin shouted muffled. The Paladin roared, clawing at the sentient cloak. Darren sprinted forward. One clean swipe severed Valari's bindings. Another freed Cyrene. He shoved a device into Cyrene's hand. "Workshop protocol, Epsilon 93, activate and run." "We're not leaving you," Valari protested. "Not a request." He pushed them toward the exit. They ran. The Paladin tore Grin free and flung him aside like rags. Darren turned. "Weapon ready." This wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a reckoning. The paladin surged forward, armor hissing as crimson plasma danced along the length of his blade. Darren barely rolled aside the weapon, slicing through the metal floor where he'd stood a second before. Heat scorched his cheek. This wasn't just a soldier, this was an apex predator in a war suit. Grin reformed midair, fluid-like, latching onto Darren's shoulders in a slick snap. "You better have a plan," it said between strained gasps, because that was not fun. "I always have a plan," Darren growled, dodging another swing. "Sometimes I make it up as I go." The paladin's blade smashed into a support pillar, shearing it clean in two. "Your resistance is irrelevant. You die today." Darren lunged forward, not to attack, but to close the gap. At close range, the paladin's massive sword was harder to maneuver. He activated the kill switch embedded in his palm. The module pulsed. The paladin staggered, armor flickering. Darren gritted his teeth. This wasn't a shutdown. Not yet, just interference. "You modified the failsafe," the paladin spat. "You designed it to kill me," Darren said. "I turned it into a remote EMP. The paladin stepped back, stabilizers flaring to maintain balance. Systems rebooted faster than Darren expected. "Shit," Grin muttered. "It's adapting." Then came the shock. Cyrene's voice, calm, deliberate, echoed from behind. "You want the codes?" she called. "You'll get them." The paladin froze. Darren turned. Cyrene stood near the entrance, cradling Valari, who was barely conscious. In Cyrene's hand was a syringe filled with a glowing violet liquid drawn directly from her arm. Her violet skin shimmered, blood trailing down her forearm in elegant, deadly arcs. "My genetic code is the key to the Imperial security network," she said, "but it only works one way into your systems." She hurled the syringe. It struck. Dead center at the vulnerable neck joint Darren had designed as a hidden contingency. The paladin reeled as the injector embedded itself. "No," it rasped. "Unauthorized code detected." His armor spasmed. Darren didn't hesitate. He surged forward and slammed his palm against the paladin's chest. "System purge," he said through clenched teeth. The kill switch module flared to life. A thunderous snap echoed through the room as electromagnetic energy surged. The paladin convulsed, limbs twitching violently. Crimson circuitry burst with arcs of lightning. Darren screamed as the power ripped through his own nerves. He collapsed to his knees, blood running from his nose, vision blurred with static. Darren Valari's voice cut through the chaos, full of panic and fury and something deeper. She rushed toward him as the paladin crumpled, spasming once, twice, and then fell still, smoking. Darren slumped, gasping. His vision narrowed to tunnels of light and darkness. Cyrene moved quickly, her fingers dancing across Darren's chest and neck, checking vitals. He overloaded his system. The feedback's killing him. "Can you stop it?" Valari asked, voice cracking. "I need time," Cyrene said, and something sharp. Grin detached, folding back to reveal Darren's trembling form. "Use the knife," it said, "the one in his boot. Plasma-tipped surgical edge." Cyrene didn't hesitate. She cut open the skin above the module. Darren's breath hitched as blood welled. Then her fingers reached in and began disabling connections with inhuman precision. Valari, kneeling beside him, cradled his head. Psionic energy crackled from her palms, raw, uncontrolled. "You're not a healer," Cyrene warned. "I'm enough," Valari whispered. Her eyes glowed, the air warping faintly. The psionic current flowed into Darren's body, slowing his convulsions, stabilizing his erratic pulse. She was burning herself to keep him alive. Cyrene severed the final connection. The kill switch module detached and dropped into her hand, still smoking. Darren gasped, then fell unconscious. Valerie collapsed against his chest, sobbing. Grin wrapped around them both like a shield. "I told him this was suicide," it said. "He really doesn't listen." Darren woke to pain. Not sharp, not fresh, dull, like a war echo pulsing in his bones. His head pounded, his body ached, and he was lying on something soft. He blinked. Dim light, the smell of oil, burnt ozone, silk. He turned his head. Valerie was asleep in a chair beside him, her face pale, silver hair disheveled. One hand still rested on his chest like she'd refused to move for hours. Cyrene was awake. Of course she was monitoring a control station at the edge of the room. Her fingers danced across a display screen. "You're back," Grin whispered from the edge of the cot. "What happened?" Darren rasped. Cyrene turned. For once she looked relieved. "The broadcast worked." "What broadcast?" She tapped a screen. Images flickered across it. Imperial labs, genetic tanks, cages holding children, mind scanners, secret files, video footage, evidence. I uploaded everything Cyrene said. The Empire's greatest sins, experiments, project breeding, clone programs, the psychic suppression algorithms. Darren sat up wincing. You had that data. I am that data, she replied. 3 systems have already declared independence, she continued. The Emperor was forced to address the leaks publicly. He called it misinformation, a rebel fabrication. But he's bleeding, Darren whispered. And now they know he can bleed. Cyrene nodded. Valari stirred. When she saw him awake, she threw her arms around him, holding him like the universe was falling apart. We thought we lost you, she whispered. He leaned into her arms, trembling not from weakness, but from the weight finally being shared. Outside, the first signs of dawn broke over Narxel 9 again. This time it didn't look sick. It looked like the beginning. Darren walked slowly through what used to be a junkyard. Now it was something else entirely, a strange hybrid of memory technology and purpose. Towers of discarded hulls had been restructured into watch points. Ancient drones reprogrammed into perimeter guards buzzed quietly in the shadows. Toxic runoff had been diverted with jury-rigged filtration pipes. Everything here had been salvaged, repurposed, reclaimed. It was beautiful in its defiance. This is your empire now, Grin whispered, coiled loosely over Darren's shoulders, made of scrap and stubbornness. I've built worse, Darren muttered, running a hand along a reinforced strut that used to be a fuel injector shaft. Inside the command module, once buried under decades of decay, lights flickered softly. Cyrene sat at the main console, skin glowing faintly from the monitor's reflected hue. Her posture was still rigid, but different now. She moved with intention, not obligation. She looked up as Darren entered. We intercepted 6 comm sweeps in the last hour, all searching for us. The Empire has classified us as rogue assets of extreme priority. Dead or alive, preferably dead, but not before extraction. Darren exhaled. They're scared. They should be. In the far corner, Valari sat cross-legged, eyes closed, meditating or trying to. Her crystalline lamp pulsed beside her. She looked up and smiled as Darren entered, brushing a few strands of silver hair from her face. She looked tired but whole. We've had visitors, she said. Darren raised an eyebrow. Valari gestured to the rear compartment, where a thin, blue-skinned boy, no older than 16, sat nervously between 2 crates flanked by scavenged food and blankets. He came looking for us, she said he was part of a failed augmentation program, one of the escapees. He's not the first, Cyrene. First, Cyrene added, and he won't be the last. Darren looked out across the scrapyard again. His home, his prison, his fortress. He saw possibilities. Then we need more than walls, he said. We need infrastructure, supply tunnels, safe rooms, repeaters across the district. If we're going to protect anyone, we have to be more than lucky. Grin purred. You sound like you're staying. Darren looked at them all, Cyrene focused and unyielding. Valari bright and stubborn. The boy scared but alive. I'm tired of running. Cyrene turned toward the display, loading blueprints. You'll need power nodes here, here, and here, she said, marking them on a map. I can coordinate patrol routes, but we need recruits, skilled ones. I'll find them, Darren said. Valari stood, stepping beside him. You're not alone anymore. He nodded. I know. The days blurred. Work began at sunrise and ended long after the toxic moonlight faded. Darren pulled collapsed towers into shape with repulsor lift cranes he'd salvaged from the crater rim. Cyrene coded their drones into loyalty. Valari turned dead zones into places that felt like home silks on walls, music through scavenged speakers, warmth in cold corners. But it wasn't just them anymore. More came. First, a cybernetic woman with half a face and eyes that glowed green. Then a defected Imperial comms officer who knew how to ghost through surveillance nets. Then a pair of clone siblings who only spoke in signs, their mouths too scarred from silencing implants. They didn't come looking for war. They came looking for space to breathe. And Darren gave it to them. One night, as stars blinked down through the haze, Darren sat in the command room sketching structural layouts on an old holo pad. His designs curved and weaved fluid, unlike the harsh geometry of the Empire. You're building again, Valari said softly from behind him. He didn't look up. I never stopped. I just forgot why. She walked to his side and looked down at the sketches. Not prisons, she murmured. Not palaces. No, Darren agreed. Sanctuaries, bases, hideouts, resistance cells, scattered across the sector. Small, mobile, hard to detect. Cyrene entered silently, reading the plans over his shoulder. You've mapped 37 viable sites, she noted, using abandoned colonial nodes and forgotten transit tunnels. They can't fight what they can't find, Darren said, and they can't stop an idea once it's loose. Cyrene studied him, something shifting in her eyes. You've changed, she said. No, Valerie corrected. He's remembered. They stood in silence. Grinna, unusually quiet, finally spoke. Boss, this place, this team, this isn't just resistance. This is legacy. Darren leaned back, the pad flickering in his hand. For the first time since the Mira massacre, he said, voice low, I feel like I'm not just surviving. I'm starting something. Valerie took his hand. Cyrene didn't speak, but she stepped closer. Close enough to matter. Outside the scrapyard hummed with purpose. Inside, a former architect of tyranny was building the blueprint for freedom. Valerie sat in the soft glow of her crystal lamp, its low hum synchronizing with her slow, deliberate breathing. The silk she'd laid across the floor moved with the faint air currents, catching glints of light like falling stars. Outside the scrapyard murmured with new life, makeshift training drills, reprogrammed drone patrols, whispered lessons in stolen languages. Inside, Darren watched her from across the room, arms crossed, shoulders stiff. Something was off. Your hands are shaking, he said. Valerie opened her eyes. I can feel them. The recruits, no. The Empire's hounds, their thoughts are like claws scraping glass. Cold, methodical, hungry. She stood brushing silk off her legs. It's getting stronger. I didn't know I could sense this far. Darren approached slowly. You said your psychic signature was weak, untraceable. She turned to him, eyes glowing faintly violet. It was. Cyrene entered just then, clutching a data pad and a look of restrained concern. We need to talk. Darren's expression darkened. About what? About why Valerie was considered a failure. Why she was never transferred to a research facility. Valerie flinched. Don't, Darren said gently. You don't have to. I do, she interrupted. You deserve to know. She took a breath. I wasn't just designed to breed royal heirs. I was chosen because my genetic markers hinted at anomalies, a recessive psychic potential that the breeding program thought it could pass on. Darren's jaw clenched, and I refused. Cyrene added 3 successful conceptions, 3 terminations, self-induced. Valerie's voice broke slightly. I wouldn't bring children into slavery. She turned her back, her fingers absently brushing a faint scar along her abdomen. After the 3rd time they punished me, they implanted control devices, pain inducers for disobedience, pleasure stimulants for imperial visits. They tried to retrain me. Darren reached out, his hand hovered over her shoulder, unsure. Then he rested it there, not possessively, protectively. She leaned into it. They scheduled her for termination, Cyrene said, voice more steel than sorrow. I altered the protocols and ran, took her with me. That was when we became traitors. Darren exhaled, his own ghost screaming in the background. What about you? He asked Cyrene. What did they do to you? She met his gaze. My body contains encrypted command strands, keys to override systems across the Empire. Biological backdoors. You saw what it did to the Paladin. That wasn't a bug, that was by design. So why haven't they made more of you? They tried, but something in me developed independent logic. I rewrote parts of my own code, refused directives, developed attachments. She looked at Valerie for a moment longer than needed. They called it corruption. Darren didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, let me see the implants. Valerie stiffened. You trust me, don't you? He asked. I trust you, she whispered. She turned slowly, lifting the back of her shirt. A line of metallic nodes shimmered along her spine, each embedded with terrifying precision. Small, almost beautiful, but unmistakably invasive. Tech like this, it's neural threaded, Darren muttered. Removing them could kill you. Valerie met his eyes in the reflection of a polished console. Then do it carefully. He gathered his tools, micro-extractors, anesthetics, most stolen, some made. Cyrene sterilized the bench. I'll monitor vitals. Valerie lay face down, breast steady, eyes locked on Darren's. I won't scream, she said softly. I've done worse than this. Darren didn't answer. He began. The first incision was clean. Blood welled instantly but slowed with the anesthetic. The second node required a scalpel flick and a curved extractor. Cyrene read vitals aloud and clip bursts. Valerie didn't flinch, but her knuckles went white, gripping the bench. The third node sparked when detached. Valerie seized for half a second, then stilled. Darren nearly stopped. One more, he said, sweat dripping into his eyes. Just one. He reached in. It was embedded deeper, fused with spinal tissue. He had to sever it without damaging the nerve cluster. His breath slowed. His hands moved like they had years ago in the underbelly of the Imperial vaults. Click. The node dropped into a steel dish with a faint chime. Valerie exhaled, trembling eyes watering. Freedom, she whispered. Then she reached for him, bloodied, raw, and fierce, and kissed him. Not gently, not politely, but with the force of someone who had chosen this moment. He kissed her back. Grin from across the room whispered, touching. Now can we maybe focus on not getting killed? Later that night, the wind howled across Narxel 9's rusted surface. Inside the command module, warmth lingered like breath on steel. Cyrene sat beside Darren as he cleaned his tools. You've given us more than shelter, she said. I gave you a chance. No, she said, you gave us choice. She stood, turned, then paused. Do you know what they call people like you in the Empire? I have a few guesses. She looked over her shoulder. Myth. Dawn on Narxel 9 wasn't gentle. It cracked across the sky like a flare from a dying sun, painting the scrapyard in acid gold. Darren stood at the highest point, what used to be the shattered engine housing of a downed dreadnought, and scanned the horizon with a scope cobbled together from 3 species tech. He saw it. The storm was coming. They're here, he said, into the calm. Cyrene's voice came back crisp. How many? Too many. Across the valley, Imperial dropships pierced the sky, their black holes gleaming like predatory insects. Gunships flanked them, bristling with cannons. APCs rumbled down old access roads. Infantry, hundreds, maybe more, deployed in clean, brutal lines. And in the center, the replacement. A second Onyx Paladin. Told you they wouldn't give up, Grin whispered. Darren's jaw tightened. Good. Neither do we. Back in the command center, Valerie clutched the console's edge as she watched the fleet advance. They're using an orbital blockade pattern, she said. Standard suppression formation. They're expecting resistance, Cyrene added, studying the data feeds. Not what we've built. Darren returned, slinging a modified plasma launcher over his shoulder. We're not giving them a stand. We're giving them a nightmare. He looked at the ragtag crowd that had become his people, former clones, augmented, fugitives, psychic empaths, engineers turned rebels. Their faces were scared, sure, but determined. They want to break us, he said, voice steady. Then let's show them what happens when you try to crush what you can't own. Valerie stood at his side, radiant and steady. Cyrene flanked his other, cold precision in every breath. It was time. The first wave hit the outer defenses at 0800. Mines reconfigured from old mining charges ripped through the lead walkers. Plasma turrets hidden beneath discarded cruiser plating opened up with pinpoint bursts. Gravity snares launched upward, pinning airborne drones mid-flight. They're adjusting, Cyrene called, avoiding exposed kill zones. Then let's make new ones, Darren said. He activated the next line of traps, reprogrammed industrial defense drones once used to guard factory vaults. They now had one mission: destroy anything wearing the Imperial crest. Inside the command center, Valerie closed her eyes. I can feel them again. Her skin shimmered faintly, her breathing slowed. I can influence them. She opened her eyes, now glowing with full psionic light. They're so sure, so precise. It makes them fragile. She reached out with her mind. Outside, 3 squads suddenly turned on each other, firing wildly, screaming, confused. Darren watched through the feed as discipline unraveled under her pressure. You've been holding back, Grin whispered, impressed. It takes effort, Valerie gasped. Can't hold it forever. Cyrene placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, just long enough. The second wave breached the outer line. Darren led the response team, ducking between towers of scrap, laying down suppressing fire, detonating fallback traps. Grin flowed over him in combat mode, forming impact armor and reactive shielding. "Yippee-ki-yay," the cloak murmured as Darren launched a grenade through a hole in an advancing formation. He dropped another squad with precision shots and rerouted power from an inactive drone node to overload an enemy tank systems. It exploded like a dying star, but it wasn't enough. The Paladin advanced. Darren saw it on the long-range feed, taller than the last one, with a double-bladed plasma weapon and reinforced armor that didn't have his backdoor failsafe. "They upgraded," Darren muttered, and learned Cyrene added, watching the pattern shift. "They're isolating Valarie's influence, triangulating her signal." Darren's heart skipped. How close are they? Too close. Then came the breach. Valarie dropped to one knee, blood dripping from her nose. Her psychic field was flickering like a radio losing signal. "They're pushing back," she gasped, harder than before. Cyrene's hands flew across the interface. "We're losing the east corridor." Darren moved. He raced back through the inner ring, blasting through rubble, shouting orders, laying emergency traps. Around him, his people fought with the desperation of those who had nowhere left to run and no desire to kneel again. The Paladin arrived at the front gate. Its voice was deeper than the last, more mechanical, less human. "Return what belongs to the Emperor," it said. Darren stepped into view, rifle in hand, grin flaring around him like a cape of shadows. "They don't belong to him," Darren said. "And neither do I." The Paladin raised its blade. Darren fired first. They fought like two storms colliding. Darren was smaller, faster, unpredictable. The Paladin was relentless, a tank wrapped in wrath. Its blade missed Darren's head by inches. Darren's shots pinged off its adaptive shielding. He dodged, rolled, dropped charges, used the terrain like a second skin. But it was gaining. The Paladin struck hard. Darren flew back, slamming into a wall of old cruiser plating. His chest burned. Blood pooled in his mouth. Darren Valarie's scream echoed over the comms. Cyrene's voice followed. "Hold it, I'm rerouting everything." In the command center, she activated the hidden node Darren had buried months ago, the last-ditch power grid buried beneath the scrapyard's foundation. She fed all of it to Valarie. Valarie stood. Bleeding, shaking, burning, but standing. She opened her arms. The crystal on her neck flared white-hot, and the sky screamed. A wave of psychic force exploded from her chest, rippling across the battlefield like a silent shockwave. Imperial soldiers dropped their weapons. Drones froze. Even the Paladin faltered mid-strike. She didn't control their minds. She shattered their certainty. "Now," Darren Serene shouted. Darren surged forward. A final shot. Straight through the Paladin's eye slit, exposed by a second of doubt. The armor exploded inward. The beast fell, and the scrapyard roared. Smoke choked the air. Fires crackled from shattered vehicles and destroyed drones. The air shimmered with residual psionic heat. Bodies, clones, soldiers, machines littered the battlefield like fallen chess pieces. And in the center of it all stood Darren Vale, bloodied, breathless, watching the Paladin's corpse flicker and collapse in on itself like a dying star. Grin whispered against his ear, voice uncharacteristically soft. "That was a little too close." "No argument here," Darren muttered, wiping blood from his lips. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Cyrene's voice crackled through the comms. "They've pulled back, temporarily, but more are coming." "How many more?" Cyrene didn't answer. Which meant too many. Valarie staggered toward Darren, her skin pale and glowing faintly from residual psionic discharge. He caught her before she collapsed, steadying her as best he could. "I bought us minutes," she rasped. "No more." Darren looked toward the horizon where new shadows moved. Transports, reinforcements. They wouldn't make the same mistakes again. "We can't hold them," he said. "Then we do something else," Serene said. "Something permanent." Darren turned as she emerged from the rear corridor of the scrapyard command center, cradling a data core module, shimmering with a strange fusion of biological tissue and encrypted tech. "What is that?" he asked. "My blood," Serene replied. "Encoded, refined, ready to upload." Darren's eyes widened. "If we can insert this into the Imperial Central Relay," she said, "it will trigger a sector-wide override. Shut down their patrol algorithms, erase tracking databases, kill biometric flags, disrupt security nets. You're talking about a data weapon. I'm talking about liberating an entire quadrant," she said, eyes cold with focus. "But it needs a delivery system." Darren looked at the module, then at the relay schematic. It's suicide, he said flatly. Yes, Cyrene replied. That's why I should do it. No, Darren's voice was sharp. Final. She blinked. You're the last thing they never controlled, he said. You're the future. You don't burn that just to buy us time. And you, Valari asked, trembling beside him. What are you? Darren smiled grimly. I'm the past. They argued, of course. Cyrene calculated probability matrices. Valerie clung to his arm like she could hold back death. Grin muttered a dozen sarcastic objections. But Darren just kept working. He installed the module into his kill switch implant, the same one he'd used to fry the Paladin. Modified it again, rewiring the power channels, removing safeties, reprogramming the final sequence. When it was done, he stood in front of them, armor half-burned, eyes steady. If I don't make it back, you will, Valari snapped. Darren shook his head. If I don't let this place fall. Keep building. Keep burning. Cyrene stepped forward, lips tight, and handed him a final component, a small syringe. If they capture you, inject this into your spinal node, she said. It'll destroy the module before they can reverse it. Fast death, Darren muttered. Clean death, Cyrene corrected. The Empire gives neither. Valari cupped his cheek. I'll find you again. I swear it. Darren leaned in. Their foreheads touched their breath, mingling. I don't want again. I want now. They kissed deep, desperate, defiant. Then he turned and walked into the fire. The relay was buried inside a repurposed colonial transmitter tower, a relic of the Empire's expansionist days. Darren reached it in minutes, evading detection with a precision only an architect of the system could manage. Inside, the air was colder, cleaner, sterile, exactly like he remembered. He entered the core chamber and accessed the uplink node. The system recognized his biometric code instantly. Somehow, after all these years, the Empire's most dangerous traitor had never been scrubbed. Typical bureaucracy, Grin murmured from his shoulders. Can't even delete the people who burn your house down. Darren smirked, then inserted the module. A hum filled the air. The uplink screen lit up with a cascade of Imperial code, all trying to reject the override, but the genetic key embedded in the blood core gave Darren access that no password ever could. He had 3 minutes to complete the full data push. Uploading, he muttered. Contacts incoming, Grin warned. They're here. Darren turned just in time to see him. High Marshal Varen. Tall, clad in a silver admiral's coat. Face untouched by time. The man who had ordered Mira's purge. Varen said, staring like he'd seen a ghost. Still alive, Darren said. Still a pain in your ass. You're too late. You say that like it stopped me before. They moved at the same time. Blaster fire lit the chamber. Darren ducked behind a console. Grin extended into a shield. Sparks flew as rounds ricocheted. Darren returned fire, clipped one of the guards. Varen advanced with surgical precision. Darren was wounded, shoulder-torn, legs scorched, but he moved like someone with nothing left to lose. He activated the final phase. The upload bar hit 100%. Signal launched. Across the sector, systems began crashing. Alerts sounded in every ship. Drones fell from the sky. Data banks vanished. Imperial chokeholds dissolved in seconds. You just killed 1,000 systems, Varen hissed. Darren, bleeding and grinning, leaned against the relay wall. No, he said. I freed them. Varen raised his weapon. Darren raised the syringe. But the shot never came. A blur of silver and violet slammed into Varen Val-Ari. She tackled him to the ground with psionic force, sending his blaster skidding. Cyrene followed, calm, controlled, firing a shock dart into his chest. He convulsed and collapsed. Darren blinked in confusion. Didn't I tell you not to follow me? He croaked. Val-Ari dropped to her knees. Shut up. Cyrene knelt beside him, already injecting stabilizer foam into his wounds. We'll argue later, she said. Behind them, alarms blared, but for the first time they weren't warnings. They were signals of collapse. The Empire's leash had snapped, and the galaxy knew. 3 days after the relay burned, and the override pulse shattered the Empire's grip on the sector, the scrapyard was no longer a scrapyard. It was a symbol. Repaired drones circled overhead like mechanical guardians. Makeshift towers had become listening posts. Solar sails pulled in power. And the once-forgotten command center was now a haven with corridors filled with new voices, freedom seekers, deserters, dreamers. Inside the main chamber, Darren Vale sat in a repurposed pilot's chair, shoulder bandaged, hands still trembling from nerve damage but alive. Grin draped loosely across his shoulders, half melted in spots from plasma blasts. If anyone asks, it whispered, I totally saved your life. Sure you did. I mean emotionally. Across the room, Valari guided a young girl through a security scan. The girl's skin was patterned with glowing vines, evidence of old lab experiments. Valari knelt, gently showed her how to breathe through the DNA lock interface. She's good at that, Darren muttered. Cyrene stood beside him, arms crossed. She always was. She was never just a weapon. Neither were you. Cyrene looked at him for a long moment, eyes unreadable. Then she nodded. Status report, he asked. 3 colonies in open rebellion. Imperial forces pulling back from the outer rim. Refugees keep coming. Our last intake doubled in 24 hours. Darren rubbed his temples. We need more space. You need more sleep. He smirked. Tell the galaxy to wait. Cyrene tapped a console. No need. You've already started something they can't stop. That night, under a sky not quite free but no longer owned, Darren stood at the top of the scrapyard's main tower. The wind tugged at his jacket. His body still ached. His soul, less. Valerie joined him quietly, a bottle in one hand. What is that, he asked. Contraband liquor, she said. From the old supply crates. She handed him a glass. They clinked. To surviving, she said. To what comes next. They sipped. Silence stretched. I had a name once, she said suddenly. Before Valari. Darren looked at her. What was it? I don't remember. She exhaled. But here with you, I don't need it. He reached for her hand. Do you ever regret helping us, she asked. He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You're not listening, Val. I'm serious. So am I. He stepped close. You gave me something to fight for, not just against. Behind them, Serene emerged from the tower's stairwell. Her steps were slower than usual. No weapons, no data pads, just her. Interrupting, she asked softly. Valerie turned, smiling. Always. Cyrene approached and stood beside them. Together, the 3 watched the skyline, now dotted with lights that didn't belong to slavers or warships, but to survivors rebuilding. Do you know what the Empire's last message about us said? Cyrene asked. Darren raised an eyebrow. What? High-threat rogue entities? Classified, irredeemable. Valari laughed. Then they finally got something right. Cyrene's expression shifted, something deep, quiet, but warm. Then she knelt. Valari followed. Darren blinked. What are you? We're not yours by law, Cyrene said. Valari looked up, eyes glistening. But by choice, if you'll have us. Darren's mouth went dry. Grin whispered, say yes, idiot. He knelt with them. I'm not your master, he said. I'm not your savior. No, Cyrene, he said. You're our anchor. Valari kissed him softly. You're our beginning. Grin wrapped around their backs like a warm wind. This might actually be home, it whispered. Weeks passed. The scrapyard transformed into a command hub, the Nexus they called it. From it, Darren's network expanded. Safe houses sprang up across the sector. Smugglers became supply runners. Former bounty hunters guarded refugee paths. Clones once conditioned for obedience now trained each other in choice. And at the center of it all, 3 legends. The architect who burned his own empire to build sanctuaries from ruin. The breeder who rejected royalty and became a psionic storm. The shadow clone who rewrote her code and turned death into freedom. They weren't weapons. They weren't rebels. They were a family. One evening, as Narxel 9's twin moons cast pale light across the steel towers, Grin curled into a semi-coherent form on Darren's desk. Can I ask something? Not sarcastic. Darren raised an eyebrow. You're capable of that. Shocking, I know. Grin's voice was quieter than usual. Do you think this will last? Darren looked out the window where a new ship was landing, its hull marked with a sigil not of royalty, but of sanctuary, 3 spirals interlocked. I don't know, he admitted. Grin pulsed, but you're still building. Yes, Darren said. Why? Darren smiled. Because they're still coming. Somewhere in the stars, the Empire was still vast, still cruel, but it was no longer unchallenged. Because on a toxic moon in the skeleton of forgotten machines, a man with a past and 2 women with futures had lit a fire. And from that fire came something the Empire could never program. Hope.